Hi, good evening po sa inyong lahat. Nandito po ulit tayo. Good evening to the friends of Philippine Bayanihan Society in Singapore. So nandito po ulit tayo, another webinar, another night of good thoughts and good stuff to know. This time we have information more from our Consul, Lala, from the Philippine Embassy in Singapore. In this period of pandemic, there are a lot of things that have been adjusted, changed. Kasi hindi naman tayo po pwedeng lumabas ng basta-basta or mag-open ng office ng basta-basta. So we will learn a lot more later pag magsasalita na po ang ating guest speaker who has been in Singapore for a few years na. But before I give the floor to her, konting information lang po about Philippine Bayanihan Society dito sa Singapore, just in case first time ninyong marinig ang Bayanihan Society. So meron po tayong society, meron siyang building. We have a Bayanihan Center na 4-story building. And then we also have courses and lessons and training and other upskilling para po sa mga kababayan natin. Para pag uwi sa Pilipinas, may bago tayong skill at may maganda pa tayong ibang trabahong magawa. So meron po tayo dyan mga public speaking workshops, may mga lessons on cooking and baking, plus bookkeeping, cosmetology, and just all under our FAUS, which is Filipino Overseas Workers. So that's an affiliate of the embassy ng Singapore, ng Pilipinas dito sa Singapore. So they hold classes para po sa mga kababayan natin on Sundays. Para hindi po sayang yung Sundays natin, we learn something new. Also, mayroon po tayong photo studio na pwede pong gamitin. Natin, mga portraits, mga pictures, family pictures, yung mga mahilig pa tayo picture taking. So please take advantage of that photo studio. It's well equipped. And then we also have tambayan, pwede pong mag-meeting doon ng mga Philippine organizations na nandito sa Singapore. Madami po sila. Kaya pwede pong gamitin ng tambayan at mailboxes and other meeting rooms. So just get in touch po with our center managers, Cecil at si Mindy. You will see the details later, contact details at the end of this discussion. So just some pictures na nakikita ninyo. Bayanihan walk activities, Bayanihan lecture, which we had last year. And I think we will be having more this year, and of course this webinar instead of our Bayanihan Talks series. So okay, hopefully may konti na kayong alam tungkol sa ating Bayanihan Center. It's for everyone to enjoy, so please take advantage of what we have in Singapore. So before we proceed, let me just say something about our next speaker. Si Consul Lala, who is ang full name niya, Miss Lala Consul Lala, or Consul Laarni, Zorayda, Gandarosa, and we normally call her Consul Lala. She's a very friendly person. Mabait siya. And she's been in Singapore for 5 years na. She's currently the 3rd Secretary and Vice Consul, I think Consul na, di ba? Ng Philippine Embassy in Singapore. So belated congratulations again on that promotion. And she has worked with the assistance to national sections. Meron din po siyang involved siya sa, of course, sa Filipino Community Relations section and the Gender and Development Officer po si Consul Lala. And currently she's heading the consular section sa embassy. Before that, naka 3 years din siya as a foreign service officer sa Department of Foreign Affairs sa Pilipinas, acting as Department Budget Officer, and also was involved in the Financial Planning Division. And even before that, talagang si Consul Lala, pwede siyang accountant siguro, no? She was also in the Bureau of Internal Revenue National Office. And siyempre, sasabihin natin, siya ay galing sa University of the Philippines, graduating as a cum laude with a degree in Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. So, yes, impressive po ang kanyang biodata. So, we should be proud na may ganito tayo sa Singapore. And let's, before further ado, let me call on Consular. Sige po. Let's listen to her.
Thank you, Ms. Minnie, for the kind introduction. Before I start the presentation, let me first acknowledge my boss, the Philippine Ambassador to Singapore, Ambassador Joseph Del Mar Yap, whose leadership, guidance, and support continue to inspire us to stay focused on our work in spite of the uncertainties brought about by the pandemic. I would also like to acknowledge my colleagues in the embassy, Conjen Bernie Candolada, fellow officers and personnel, the brave and hardworking consular section team, particularly August, for helping me put this presentation together. To the Philippine Bayanihan Society, led by Attorney Ranbir, thank you for giving us the opportunity to connect with our clients through this webinar. Sa atin pong mga viewers ngayong gabi, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Dalangin po namin na kayo ay nasa mabuting kalagayan at ligtas sa pandemya. Along with ATN, Consular Services fall under the third pillar of Philippine foreign policy, which is the protection of the rights and promotion of the welfare and interests of Filipinos overseas. For the information of our audience, the Philippine Embassy in Singapore is considered a consular heavy post. We hope that through this presentation, our clients will gain more awareness on the changes in our consular operations and be familiar with the various services offered by the embassy. In the next slide, I will walk you through the outline of the presentation. First, we will discuss the changes in the embassy procedures under the new normal. Then, we will give you a breakdown of our consular services. After that, we will proceed with our discussion on the Philippine passport, including what to do once your passport is lost and how to avail of passport validity extension. We'll also discuss how you can avail of other consular services, such as consularization, authentication, and notarization, NBI clearance fingerprinting, translation, and certification services. After which, we will discuss citizenship matters, the current entry restrictions on foreign nationals, and who are exempted from these restrictions. Lastly, we will discuss briefly civil registration, which is under the able hands of Consul Tony Reyes. The last part of this presentation will touch on overseas voting. After that, we will proceed to the Q&A. We will be sharing for the first time 2 information videos that we've prepared for the Filipino community, which we will later share in our social media accounts. The first video is on the changes in the embassy under the new normal. We will now play the video.
The Philippine Embassy's safe distancing and health management measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Various precautionary measures have been implemented to safeguard your health and well-being. They may cause inconvenience, but we request your cooperation, patience, and understanding. Here are a few adjustments on the embassy procedures. The embassy has implemented a strictly by appointment policy for all its labor and consular services. This is meant to protect our clients, especially the most vulnerable and at-risk groups. If you are unwell and exhibiting the following symptoms, please stay home. If you are serving a stay-home notice, wait for clearance from the health authorities before coming down to the embassy. Notify us via email so that we can make adjustments on your appointment date. Make sure to wear a mask when stepping out of your residence. At the embassy entrance, use the Safe Entry Exit app to check in. Hand sanitizers are provided at the public area for your use. Maintain a safe distance from each other when queuing. Do not sit on the marked chairs. Stand only on the marked areas. Our frontline personnel are equipped with PPEs when dealing with clients. Transaction windows are sealed to prevent the exchange of droplets. We have installed a two-way microphone for ease of communication. Through the appointment system and pre-screening of transactions, contact time between the client and frontline personnel has been significantly reduced. After your transaction, do not forget to check out using the Safe Entry Exit app. We look forward to serving you.
So that's the embassy under the new normal. You may recall that on the 7th of April, Singapore switched on a circuit breaker to choke off the spread of COVID-19. The declaration of the circuit breaker, as well as the passage of the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act, limited the movement of people in Singapore. To further protect the Filipino community, the embassy decided to temporarily suspend consular and labor services from 13 April to 25 May, but we maintained a skeleton force to provide assistance on emergency cases. The temporary suspension affected approximately 4,000 passport appointments and around 16,000 consular transactions. In the next slide, we will show you how we caught up with the backlog. The embassy partially opened for passport renewals on 26 May 2020, 6 days ahead of the lifting of the circuit breaker period. We also remained open on all Sundays of June to serve our passport clients. Since the resumption of our services on 26 May, we have already processed 17,368 transactions, 5,786 of which are passports. In the next slide, we will show you how we currently do business in the embassy. The recent adjustments in the embassy's facilities and procedures is in line with the recommended health protocols of the DFA Home Office and MOH. Our goal is to ensure business continuity without compromising the health and welfare of our clients. As you may have heard, there are already 7 Philippine Foreign Service posts whose personnel were infected by COVID-19, which resulted in the disruption of their operations. While the embassy remains COVID-19 free as I speak, let us bear in mind that the embassy attends to an average of 500 clients every day, and almost 200 Filipinos in Singapore had already been infected with COVID-19. Thus, the embassy deemed it necessary to adopt, for the time being, a strictly by appointment policy. We published this advisory before the CBP was lifted. So this is the advisory that we published before the CBP was lifted on June 2, 2020. In the next slide, we will show you how the embassy observes strict safe distancing and health measures, which was also shown in the video. We have implemented the following: an appointment system for all services, the safe entry and exit system, temperature screening. There is an expectation that our clients will be truthful in declaring their travel history and will refrain from coming to the embassy if they are unwell. We have also provided hand sanitizers in our public areas. As mentioned in the video, we closed the service window openings to prevent the exchange of droplets. In the passport encoding room, where we process around 150 passports per day, the cubicles of encoders have also been sealed. Our passport team is required to wear a surgical mask and face shield. Lastly, we ensure that we frequently and thoroughly disinfect the embassy premises. To give you an appreciation of the number of clients that we cater to on a yearly basis, we would like to draw your attention to the pie chart in the next slide, which will give you a glimpse of the distribution of our transactions. So almost 50% of the services of the embassy is authentication, and 32% is passporting. Last year, the embassy catered to 123,898 consular clients. This is in addition to the 230,000 clients of our labor section. So in the next slide, we will show you a breakdown of these consular services. These are the types of consular services that are offered by the embassy. We will have a discussion on this in the succeeding slides. Let us first talk about the Philippine Passport, which is considered to be the face of consular services. The Philippine government actually issues 3 kinds of passports. First is the regular passport, which is brown in color, which majority of us have. So yung meron po tayo, no, yung brown passport. Next is the diplomatic passport, which is blue in color, given to persons imbued with diplomatic status. This is the color of the passport of our president and that of our ambassador. The content is basically the same as the regular passport, but the designation of the passport holder is written on the opposite side of the biometric information page. The third kind is the official or red passport, which is issued to government officials. Unlike the regular passport, the diplomatic and official passports actually need to be revalidated if the traveler is traveling to the Philippines. In the next slide, I will show you another document that serves as temporary passport or evidence of identity. You may have heard about the travel document. So ito yung tinatawag natin na TD. The TD is a one-page document containing the description and personal circumstances of its bearer. So literally one page lang siya. Yung page una niya. Issued for one-way travel to the Philippines. This particular TD is a TD for a newborn infant. Kaya may nakalagay po na for ICA. The TD is issued to tourists, seafarers, and OFWs who lost or mutilated their passports and Filipino nationals without a valid passport and are for repatriation after serving jail time in SG prisons. Normally po kasi may mga kababayan tayo na medyo matagal sa prison. So by the time na lalabas sila sa prison, expired na po ang kanilang passport, so we just issue them a travel document. The TD, as I've mentioned kanina, serves also as a temporary passport or evidence of identity for newborn children. We noticed that because of this pandemic, marami sa ating mga kababayan would choose to give birth here in Singapore. So what we do is we issue their children this temporary travel document while they are waiting for their new passport. Please note that the TD has limited usability. It cannot be used for travel to another country. So nakalagay talaga one-way travel to the Philippines, except, mamaya, no, if you are a Filipino national who is a legal resident of Singapore. We will touch on this later on the segment on lost passports. We are pleased to deliver the good news that the Secretary of Foreign Affairs has approved the issuance of emergency TD in booklet form. So hindi na siya ganito, hindi na siya one page. No, I'm sure may nakakita po kayo ng mga emergency passports ng ibang bansa. Hindi siya kasing kapal ng passport, mas manipis siya, pero mukha siyang passport. So magkakaroon na po tayo niyan sa Pilipinas, no? At i-issue na rin po yan ng mga foreign service posts. This will address situations where overseas Filipinos with emergency or urgent travel requirements whose passports are lost or have expired. In the next slide, we listed the important things you need to know about your passport. So it's very important to bear these reminders in mind para po hindi tayo magkakaproblema sa ating passport. Number one is to keep your passport in a safe, secure, and accessible place. It should be accessible to you in case of emergency. You've heard of the special flights to the Philippines. We noticed 1 or 2 people would tell us 2 days before the flight na hindi na po nila makahanap yung kanilang passport kasi hindi nila matandaan kung saan nila nilagay. So we strongly suggest that you keep a copy of the information page of your passport. So keep a hard copy, photocopy nyo yan, and then keep it. And a soft copy also, take a photo and keep it for contingencies in case your passport gets lost, no? Number 2 is that an adult's passport has a validity of 10 years. We know that, no? Na ang ating passport is actually given already a validity of 10 years. Maliban lang kung ikaw ay minor. Bakit? Kasi nag-iiba pa po ang facial features ng mga bata, kaya po ang kanilang passport validity ay 5 years lamang. We actually started issuing the 10-year valid passports in January 2018. Number 3, this is very important. To enable you to travel, your passport should have a validity of at least 6 months. So dapat at least 6 months. So i-count niyo po yan, hindi lang po sa month, kundi po sa day. We've had cases also na nagkulang na ng 2 araw or 3 araw, hindi na po sila pwedeng makasakay pabalik sa Singapore. However, if you are traveling to the Philippines, you can still use your passport up to the date of its expiration. Bakit? Because you are going back to your country of origin. We encourage you to renew your passport at least 1 year before the expiration date. Bakit 1 year? Because in Singapore, it takes a longer time also to process your passport. Katulad nito, we have a pandemic, so yung iba naabutan na kulang na yung passport validity, but they need to renew their work passes, no? Or residency permits here in Singapore. Please always keep in mind the expiration date of your passport. So I would suggest, sa likod ng passport nyo, lagi nyo, siguro ilagyan nyo lang siya na reminder, or ilagyan nyo lang siya ng ano, no, or magsingit kayo dyan ng papel, ilagay nyo kung kailan nyo dapat i-renew yung passport nyo para hindi kayo magkakaproblema. Especially dahil 10 years na po ang validity ng passport natin, I'm sure minsan nakakalimutan natin kung kailan po natin siya dapat i-renew. And the next one is the passport fee. Do you know that the passport fee in Singapore is $102? Siyempre sa mga nag-renew, alam nyo na yun, no? Pero did you know that the passport fee has actually not been changed since 13 January 2000? Ibig sabihin, ang ating cost ng ating passport is not inflation adjusted. So 102 Singaporean dollars pa rin siya. No? That's standardized actually among all foreign service posts. No? Nagkakaiba lang sila sa exchange rate. Since all passports are produced in the Philippines, the waiting time for passport applicants of the Philippine Embassy in Singapore is 6 weeks. So kanina na-mention ko, kaya kailangan yung renew yung passport 1 year before its expiration ay dahil mas matagal ang pag-process ng passport dito sa atin at ang pag-produce po ng passport ay ginagawa pa sa Manila. Express processing is not available abroad. The next one is, this is a good reminder to you, the embassy will cancel passports that are unclaimed for more than a year. So dapat po, as soon as makita ninyo na available na yung passport nyo, kunin na ninyo. Alam ko may mga nagpa-extend na ayaw pa nilang kunin yung kanilang pasaporte, pero please make sure also that you get your passport before 1 year na mag-lapse, no? And then you may check the availability of your passport actually online. For some of you who have renewed their passports in Singapore, makikita po ninyo sa ating website, may nakalagay doon Consular section, just click that portion, and then pag click nyo po doon passports, may nakalagay po ulit passports ready for collection. So you can actually check if your passport is available. Ang napansin namin lately, ang waiting time natin, no, for Singapore is 4 weeks na. Siguro mas may bentahan na nasa Singapore tayo, kaya dahil mas malapit tayo sa Pilipinas, kaya po mas mabilis ang pagbalik po ng passport from the time of application. Note that the pink collection slip is not a confirmation of your appointment. Sinabi ko kanina po kasi na lahat na po ng ating mga serbisyo sa embahada ay by appointment. Kailangan po nating mag-adjust, no? That's why we request you to check the validity of your the availability of your passport online first, and then email us and request for a collection slot, no, for the collection of your passport. Another thing that you should know about your passport is that you can actually have your passport released to the nearest DFA office of your choice if you are going home to the Philippines, or if you are, relocating na for good to the Philippines. And then, say for example, you're a nurse here and then you got a job offer in Canada, tapos renew ka ng passport dito, hindi mo na inabot yung passport mo, pwede mong i-request ang embassy or sa Manila pa lang na i-transfer na ang release ng iyong passport to the nearest Philippine Embassy or Consulate General that has jurisdiction over your new place of employment. Another very important thing that you should do once you receive your passport, this is very important, is to declare the details of your new passport to the MOM or the ICA. This applies to you and your dependents. because failure to declare may result in the imposition of a fine, or worse, baka ma-cancel pa yung work pass. I'm sure you remember that when you signed your employment contracts with your employers, nakalagay doon, there's a reminder there that you have to inform them once there is a change in your particulars, and that includes your Philippine passport, because they have to update also the records sa MOM at sa ICA. Kasi diba, kailangan din natin i-check dahil dito automated checkpoints po ang pagpasok at paglabas ng Singapore if you are a legal resident of Singapore. In the next slide, we will discuss what you should do once your passport is lost. Ito very important to. Before the pandemic, we know that a lot of our kababayans would actually travel to places like Europe, in the Americas, and most of the time, nawawala po ang passport natin along the way. So, dalawa po ang scenarios na aming create. The first one is what to do once you lose your passport in Singapore. And number 2 is, anong gagawin mo pag nawala mo yung passport mo sa labas ng Singapore at sa labas ng Pilipinas. Bakit ko sinabi na sa labas ng Pilipinas? Because, syempre, pag nasa loob ka ng Pilipinas, di mo naman kailangan ng passport and pwede ka na agad mag-apply ng iyong bagong passport. So, this is the first scenario, no? The first thing that you should do is to report the loss of your passport to the nearest station of the Singapore Police Force. So, may nakita kayong neighborhood police station, punta kayo doon, you declare the loss of your passport. The next thing that you should do is to notify immediately the passport unit of the embassy by emailing us. So, this is our email address, and you can also find this on our website. You will be given instructions by our passport team on how to apply for a replacement passport. Lost passports, for your information, are actually reported to the DFA Office of Consular Affairs for inclusion in the watch list. Ito, na-mention ko na ang watch list. Later, we will talk kung sino yung mga sinasama sa watch list. Please note that those who have lost their passports will be prioritized for passport renewal. And lost passports actually have to follow a 15-day clearing period, no, bago natin i-proceed ang ating passport application, no. And then in the next slide, we will discuss what you should do once you lost your passport outside the Philippines and Singapore. I forgot to mention this, no, kasi kanina na-mention ko pala. What if pauwi ka na, tapos sa special flight ka, and then dineclare mo na wala ang passport mo, and then eventually, after an hour or two, you were able to recover your passport na isiksik mo lang siya somewhere nun sa luggage mo. So what you should do is to report immediately to the Singapore Police Force. Bakit? Dahil sa Singapore, ang Singapore Police Force po at ang ICA ay nakakabet ang database. Pag dineclare nyo na po yan, na lost na po yung passport, naka-flag na po yan sa lahat ng immigration checkpoints ng Singapore. And these passports are no longer recognized as valid for travel unless they are removed from the lost passports database of ICA and BSPF. The next scenario tackles what you should do when you lose your passport outside the Philippines and Singapore. Okay, so the first thing is to report the loss of your passport to the nearest embassy or consulate general. So I'm sure you know na may 94 tayo na foreign service posts abroad, no? Outside the Philippines. So lahat po ng embassies at Philippine consulates general, meron po silang format nitong tinatawag natin na travel document. Okay, after reporting it to the nearest Philippine Embassy or Consulate General, and then after the issuance of your travel document, you should notify us. Again, notify the passport team of SGPE. You email us. And the embassy will issue the so-called letter of guarantee, ang tawag namin dyan LOG, to the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority, requesting the ICA to allow you to enter Singapore using a travel document, yung TD. That is kung ikaw po ay legal resident ng Singapore. Pero kung turista ka, syempre, hindi po kayo papayagan, dapat po ang gagawin ninyo, umuwi po kayo sa Pilipinas. The LOG is also an assurance to the ICA that the bearer of the travel document will be issued the Philippine passport upon arrival in Singapore. In the next slide, we will discuss passport validity extension. So I've mentioned kanina that the embassy remained open during the circuit breaker period, and we were stationed at the embassy for emergency cases. These emergency cases, ito yung extension of passports ng ating mga kababayan na kailangan na nilang mag-renew ng kanilang work pass. You may recall that in October 2019, the embassy issued an advisory that manual extension will be discontinued. This is in compliance with the audit recommendation of the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, as manually extended passports are not recognized by some immigration authorities. Meron po kasing mga territories na sobrang strict, no? They don't accept manual extension of passport validity. And this actually causes a problem to Filipino travelers. Due to COVID-19, however, the manual extension had to be reinstated to be able to assist our kababayans. And the extension in Singapore is only allowed for two reasons. First is for immediate pass renewal, and the second one is for urgent travel. Since March 23, 2020, the embassy had already manually extended the validity of almost 1,500 passports. The passport validity extension should actually be applied in person. There were instances, however, when the embassy allowed an authorized representative, so pwede pong proxy, to submit the passports of our kababayans who are staying in dormitories. Kung naalala niyo po, kasagsagan po ng COVID sa dormitories noong April and May, and some of them kailangan na nilang mag-renew ng work pass nila, so we allowed their representative to bring their passports to the embassy because they're also not allowed to get out of the dormitories. So how about Filipinos in nearby areas such as Bintan, Batam, and JB? Kasi itong mga places po na ito ay mas malapit sa Singapore kesa sa Philippine Embassy sa Jakarta at sa Philippine Embassy sa Kuala Lumpur. We extend the validity of passports of Filipinos in Batam and Bintan in Indonesia and Johor Bahru in Malaysia. The embassy also extends the passports of Filipinos in Camp Diego Garcia. I'm not sure if this is the first time na narinig nyo ito, no? Camp Diego Garcia is actually a small isolated island in the Indian Ocean. So may mga Pilipino po doon, pag kailangan pong ma-extend na kanilang passport, dito po nila dinadaan sa Singapore kasi dito po diretso ang flight nila from Camp Diego Garcia. And of course, we also extend the passports of our seafarers na minsan, pa-expire na yung passport, dadaan sa Singapore, no? Magre-refuel, or some of them will be signing off from Singapore. So we allow passport validity extension. So how do we do this? Considering that Singapore is very strict nga, no, sa pagpasok ng mga short-term visitors. So just like what I mentioned kanina, we also allow application of passport extension through a proxy. What they should do is to arrange for this proxy to apply for passport extension. So first thing that they should do is to email us, and then the proxy will bring to the embassy the passport. So dapat po yung physical copy ng passport dala-dala po kasi dito po natin yan tinatatak, no? An authorization letter, the duly accomplished passport validity extension form, and cash payment of $34. So medyo marami-rami na rin yung mga requests, no, from seafarers who will be signing off from Singapore na kailangan po nila ng passport validity extension. Let us now discuss the passport watch list. Ito yung tinatawag nila, ay may hit ako sa passport, no? We mentioned earlier yung passport watch list. We will discuss what types of applicants are actually included in the passport watch list. Number one, yung nag-assume ng identity ng ibang tao. Alam ko po, noong 1990s, 1980s, uso po ito, no? Ginagamit yung identity ng isang tao para makalabas ng bansa. Kasi mas madali because yun nga kumpleto ang civil registration documents and other requirements. Number two, pag sinangla mo ang passport mo, masasama ka sa passport watch list. Number 3, yung may mga discrepancy sa civil registration documents, katulad ng mali ang sex or mali ang name, no? Kasi may mga times din na yung spelling ay magkaiba. So, pero mostly po ang nagkakaproblema dyan ay yung sex, either male or female. So, female siya, nakalagay male, no? Sa declaration, sa kanyang birth certificate or any other civil registration document, no? Next one ay yung mga may unclaimed na valid na passport. Kasi pag meron kang unclaimed passport, bakit ka pa mag-apply? So that actually raises, you know, some suspicion na bakit kailangan mong mag-renew ulit ng passport when you already have a valid passport, no? And of course, another group ay ito yung may mga unsettled financial or service obligations with the Philippine government. Examples nito ay yung mga government scholars or former government employees na pinaaral ng gobyerno pero umalis sila sa serbisyo na hindi nila nababayaran ang kanilang obligasyon. Isa pa po sa mga nakakasama sa watchlist ay yung tinatawag natin na mga fugitives from justice. And nasama po sa DFA lookout list. Marami po tayong cases din na ganito. Minsan may kasong estafa sa atin sa Pilipinas or may kasong bigamy. So iba po dyan, pinapasama po sa DFA lookout list. Hindi naman po yan arbitrarily nilalagay ng embassy. Actually, ang ginagawa po niyan is galing po sa DFA yung instructions, no? And then, masasama ka sa watchlist kapag ikaw ay madalas na nagde-declare na nawawala ang iyong pasaporte. So, pag 3 beses mo nang dineclare na nawala ang passport mo within a 2-year period, masasama ka sa watchlist. And then of course, the last one is yung mga Pilipino na nag-renounce ng kanilang citizenship dahil sila ay nag-acquire ng foreign citizenship. Sa ngayon po, there are 15 individuals whose passport application are suspended due to the inclusion in the watch list. So 15 individuals in Singapore actually ang nasa watch list. In the next slide, we will share some passport trivia. So nauna ang trivia bago sa akin. No? Do you know how many unreleased passports are in the custody of the embassy at any given time? 5,500 po na unreleased passports ang hawak ng embahada. Kaya po yan, may sistema tayo, no, kung paano po ang pag-collect, no, which was actually developed by a colleague at the Philippine Embassy who's already left for Manila, no. So ito yon, kaya tayo may sistema para mas madali po ang pag-segregate natin ng passports, lalo na ngayon na may pandemya. How many pages are there in a Philippine passport? So, na-mention ko kanina na kailangan, I think I failed to mention it, that you have to renew your passport if it's already running out of passport pages for stamping. Like yung mga galing nga sa Bintan or sa Johor Bahru na madalas po ini-stampan yung kanilang passport. So, minsan, nagkukulang na po ito, no? So, yun po ang ating passport trivia. We will now show you a video on how you can easily apply for passport renewal in Singapore. You do not need to hire an agent to do this for you. Napakadali po ng process ng passport renewal, no? Siguro, it's high time na rin na i-share natin ito sa Filipino community para mas aware sila at mas malalaman nila kasi parang walkthrough talaga to on how to do the passport renewal. As the Philippine passport is your primary identification document, importante po that you assume responsibility also over this document. So we will show you the 5 easy steps in applying for a Philippine passport. Okay, so madali lang po talaga ang pag-renew ng ating passport dito po, lalo na po dito sa Singapore. Now, let's wrap up our discussion on passports in the next slide by knowing the profile of Filipinos in Singapore. So, minsan siguro nagtataka kayo kung bakit kami nang hihingi ng information kung saan kayo nag-work, ano yung position natin, ano yung age, no? Kasi po, minomonitor din po ito ng Embahada at ng Department of Foreign Affairs. By sex po, ito po ang profile ng Filipinos in Singapore. 71% are actually females, 29% are males. So mas madami talaga ang kababaihan sa Singapore. By occupation, 42% are household service workers, 6% are dependent pass holders and students, and 52% are professional, skilled, and semi-skilled workers. Ito, very important. By age, sino ang mas madami sa Singapore? 41% actually ay nasa 35 to 44 age group. Sinusundan to na mga nasa 45 to 54 at nasa 25 to 34. So relatively mas bata yung population ng overseas Filipinos in Singapore. Let us now proceed to consularization, no, which accounts for 50% of the consular transactions of the embassy. So let's start with authentication. Bakit may authentication? Because official documents issued in Singapore are acceptable only in the Philippines pag dumaan sa Philippine Embassy, no? An official document will be authenticated by the embassy. Dalawa po ang pamamaraan. Number one is ang authentication ng isang government-issued document, which is demonstrated in the next slide. So ang pinakauna po ay, say for example, meron po kayong school records, no? Sa next slide po natin, makikita ninyo na ang certification by the issuing government office is actually a requirement before that particular document is authenticated by the DFA and before the embassy will authenticate it. Alam niyo po ba kung saan ang MFA? Ang MFA po, medyo malapit lang siya sa embassy, nasa 1 Sherwood Road, Tanglin, Singapore. So, meron po tayong mga kababayan na minsan yung mga anak nila gusto na nilang pauwiin sa Pilipinas. So, pinapa-authenticate nila yung school records ng mga bata dito sa Philippine Embassy. Yung pangalawa pong klase ay ang authentication ng mga non-government naman or commercial documents, no? Say for example, articles of incorporation, director certificate. So iba ang proseso. Una, that document should be brought to the notary public first and then dalhin sa Singapore Academy of Law and then dadalhin sa Philippine Embassy. Ito po kasi a requirement under the Notarial Law of Singapore. So that's how you do the authentication. No? The next one is notarization. Actually, ang provision ng notarial services ng embassy ay similar doon sa pagnonotaryo ng mga notaryo publiko sa Pilipinas. No? This is done on documents or instruments that will be used in the Philippines. So ito requirement, dapat yung tao na nag-execute ng dokumento ay dapat pumunta sa embahada at doon mismo pumirma. Dahil po yan ang requirement sa ating batas sa Pilipinas. No? To establish your identity, kailangan po may competent na evidence. So kailangan po ang inyong valid passport or Singapore IC. Ngayon, natapos na natin ang authentication at ang notarization. Pag-usapan naman natin ang NBI clearance application through fingerprinting. So medyo madami-dami din, no? Or siguro mga around 70 to 80 are nag-a-apply sa embassy for NBI clearance fingerprinting. So let me just say that the NBI form is actually not a consular document. Kaya lang ang embassy po ay nag-assist sa mga kababayan natin na nag-a-apply ng NBI clearance in terms of fingerprinting on the card form. Kasi may sistema, di ba, yung paglagay ng fingerprints doon mismo sa NBI form. Upon completion of the requirements, pag nakuha mo na yun sa embahada, napirmahan na ng consul, the applicant sends the form together with the authorization letter kasi papadala niya lang yun sa authorized representative niya sa Pilipinas. At yung authorized representative ang magpaprocess ng clearance sa National Bureau of Investigation. So ang proseso, pakita natin sa susunod na slide, una, Philippine Embassy, kunin ni authorized representative, dadalhin ni authorized representative sa NBI Manila. Para naman sa clearance renewal, ang sabi ng NBI, ang isang dokumento tulad ng NBI clearance ay ituturing nila na renewal ito if it was issued from 2014. If before 2014 po, ituturing na po ito na new application. So, yun po ang dapat nating tandaan sa NBI clearance. Ngayon, meron din tayong tinatawag na translation services sa embassy. No? What we do is to translate into English the certificates and diplomas written in Filipino by certain Philippine educational or training institutions. Suki dito ang UP kasi 'di ba it's written in Filipino, so kailangan i-translate ng embassy, and some of us hindi pwedeng umuwi dahil yun nga, especially now may pandemic, so ang ginagawa ng embassy is to translate it, but we would also like to clarify that the translation of the embassy is not an official translation. But if it's acceptable naman to the organization that is requesting for it, so kaya po namin binibigay ang translation service. The next one is yung certification. Ito, I would like to discuss more on this kasi ang certificate of one and the same person, normally, nangyayari ito sa isang Pilipina na nag-asawa ng foreign national, na nag-iba yung pangalan. No, I'm not sure if you remember, 2 years ago actually, there was an advisory that was issued by the embassy na lahat ng mga Pilipina na nagpalit ng kanilang apelyido, dapat dalhin nila ang lumang passport, na maiden name pa ang kanilang apelyido at ang kanilang bagong passport para maipakita sa ICA yung pagpalit ng kanilang pangalan. So to enable the embassy to attest to your identity, the certificate shall be primarily based on the following. No? Passport mo na current, previous mo na Philippine passport, PSA issued marriage certificate or report of marriage issued by the Philippine Embassy, and of course, PSA issued birth certificate. The next slide will tackle retention and reacquisition services and renunciation services. So dalawa pong klase ang ating citizenship services. Ang citizenship services po ay nasa consular section din po. So ang pinakauna is retention and reacquisition of Philippine citizenship via Republic Act number 9225. In the next slide, we will discuss this. No? This law actually took effect on 17 September 2003. So ayon sa batas, ang isang natural-born Filipino who acquired foreign citizenship can actually retain Philippine citizenship by taking the oath of allegiance to the Republic of the Philippines. So meron tayong reacquisition service sa embahada. Kung ang anak ng isang Filipino na nag-reacquire ng citizenship ay below 18 years old, pwede po siyang mag-avail ng tinatawag natin na derivative citizenship. Ipapakita natin sa susunod na slide, no? The unmarried child below 18 of those who acquire PH citizenship shall be deemed as citizens of the Philippines also. Now, napag-usapan natin ang reacquisition and retention. Pag-usapan naman natin ang renunciation. Ano renunciation? Dahil po ang Singapore does not allow dual citizenship, and any Filipino who applies for Singaporean citizenship by naturalization is actually required under Singapore law to renounce their Philippine citizenship. Hindi lang naman po Philippine citizenship, other citizenships din po. No? If, say for example, the applicant is residing outside Singapore, we've had cases like this na yung bata, inabutan ng 21, nag-aaral sa New Zealand or sa UK or sa France, and nire-require na siya ng ICA na mag-renounce ng Philippine citizenship, pwede niya yun gawin sa pinakamalapit na embassy or consulate general. So they just need to inform us in advance, the Philippine Embassy in Singapore, so that we can notify the particular Philippine Foreign Service post, and we can share also with them the form and the content of the renunciation certificate that is acknowledged by the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority. So now we move on to the trivia on citizenship. Alam niyo ba na in 2019, 544 Filipinos ang nag-renounce ng pagka-Pilipino para maging Singaporean? So that's around 45 renunciation applications every month, no? Conversely, 29 petitions also for retention of PH citizenship. Ibig sabihin yung mga nag-reacquire na kanilang pagka-Pilipino were approved by the embassy last year. 9 of whom gave up ang pagiging Singaporean nila para bumalik sa pagka-Pilipino. Since 2015 po hanggang 2019, around 126 actually na Filipinos na ang nag-reacquire ng Philippine citizenship. Mas madami po talaga ang reacquisition in places like Europe and the Americas, no? Now, let's move on to visa services. Actually, ang nangyayari ngayon, wala pong visa application sa embassy because of this particular restriction on the entry of foreign nationals because of COVID-19, because we're doing it in the interest of public health. So we issued this advisory on suspension of visa services last March na lahat ng visa-free privileges, visa on arrival, 30-day waiver, 59-day waiver, no, lahat yan, hindi po yan gumagana while there is a suspension, no? So all previously issued visas by the DFA are already deemed canceled. Ngunit, syempre, merong exemptions. So sino ang mga exempted, no? Sa susunod na slide, papakita natin kung sino yung mga exempted sa entry restrictions. Number 1, na exempted sa susunod na slide po ay yung legal spouse or minor child of a Filipino national. Dapat lang ang legal spouse or minor child ay magpapakita ng proof of marriage or filiation together with proof of citizenship of the Filipino national. So say for example, wife niya, papakita niya yung passport. Pangalawa, na exempted sa entry restrictions ay foreign government and international organization officials. In short, yung mga diplomat po. So pangatlo po ay yung mga airline crew and seafarers. On June 19, 2020, inalaw po ng IATF yung pag-create ng green lane for our seafarers. Bakit po? Because 80% of global trade is moved by maritime transport. And of course, maritime transport is dependent on our seafarers. So they are considered as essential service workers, no? And of course, aircraft personnel. Isa pa po sa mga pwedeng pumasok sa Pilipinas ay yung mga dual citizens. Hindi kailangan ng Philippine Passport para makapasok ng Pilipinas at mapatunayan na ikaw ay Pilipino. Meron pang dalawang dokumento na pwede mong gamitin. Number 1 is the Identification Certificate and the Certificate of Reacquisition or Retention of Philippine Citizenship. We had the client 2 weeks ago, ito lang ang dala niya. So what we did was to issue a certification, no, for the ICA also na ipa-board siya ng flight niya because under the rules, pwede po siyang pumasok sa Pilipinas dahil isa po siyang Pilipino kahit wala po siyang passports. Now, I'm sure you've heard about this in the news, no? Sa ating next slide, we'll just show this quickly. The entry of long-term visa holders is actually already allowed starting August 1, 2020. So, ang mga nakasama dyan ay yung mga 13 series visas, asawa ng mga Pilipino, although na nga sila, exempted na sila since March. Yung mga legal residents, katulad ng mga PRs na nasa PRs ng Pilipinas na naabutan ng ECQ dito sa Singapore. And of course, ito pa yung native-born visa, yung either or both parents are permanent residents. Okay, so we're done now with visa restrictions and etong mga updates, no, on the entry of long-term visa holders. Next is civil registration. Although this particular topic actually is handled by this particular function is actually handled by Consul Tony. So generally, ang vital event po katulad ng panganganak, pagkasal, at pagkamatay ay dapat inire-report sa embahada within 30 days. So sa embassy po, pwede nyo pong i-register ang pagpanganak sa inyong newborn, admission of paternity, using surname of father, at saka yun nga yung marriage, registration, solemnization, saka po yung no impediment to marry certificate, and of course, death. Pati po ang death ng Filipino national, you have to report it to us. And our Assistance to National Section is the one taking care of the report of death. Okay, let's go now to some trivia on civil registration. In 2019, did you know that 2% of the total number of children born in Singapore were actually Filipinos? So 678 na mga bata na pinanganak sa Singapore noong 2019 ay actually Filipino. So this is an average of 56 births per month. But we expect this number to increase this year kasi nga po hindi po sila, some of them choose not to go home na dito na sila manganak sa Singapore. So there were actually 512 Filipinos who got married in Singapore last year. So my forever para dun sa 512, no? And the embassy solemnized 32 of these marriages. Before we proceed to overseas voting registration, let me just summarize first the salient points of our discussion. Pagkaiba po kasi yung kanina at saka yung overseas voting registration. Number one is that the embassy is adopting in the interim a strictly by appointment system, which is meant to protect the well-being of the Filipino community. Number two, all consular services have gone back to normal na since June 2, 2020. Passport extension is available. Assuming the identity of another person, pawning one's passport, and discrepancy in civil registration documents will actually cause one's inclusion in the passport watch list. The embassy can issue an LOG for Filipinos who are legal residents of Singapore and who have lost their passports abroad to enable them to enter Singapore. Next one is that the Philippine government is temporarily imposing restrictions on the entry of foreign nationals, except spouses and minor children of Filipino nationals, foreign government officials, and seafarers and airline crew. And the issuance of new visas has been temporarily suspended. The last one, and probably the most important one also, is that vital events such as birth, marriage, and death should be reported within 30 days to the embassy. We will now show you an information video of the COMELEC on OV registration for the 2022 elections.
Muling nagbubukas ang overseas voting registration para sa mga Filipino abroad mula December 16, 2019 hanggang September 30, 2021. Bumisita sa ating embahada, konsulado, misyon o MECO, dala ang inyong valid Philippine Passport. Kung ikaw ay isang dual citizen, dalhin ang original o certified true copy ng inyong Certificate of Retention or Reacquisition of Philippine Citizenship. Kung ikaw ay seafarer, dalhin ang pasaporte at seaman's book sa scheduled voting outreach o akyat barko sa inyong lugar. Kung ikaw naman ay magbabakasyon abroad mula April 9 hanggang May 9, 2022, siguraduhin magparehistro bago umalis ng bansa upang makaboto sa overseas voter registration centers na itinalaga ng COMELEC at DFA-OVS. Patuloy na patatagin ang ating demokrasya, karapatan na tungkulin nating magparehistro at bumoto. Isang paalala mula sa COMELEC, DFA-OVS at Panahon TV.
Okay, katulad po na nasabi sa information video na pinakita natin, dapat po lahat po ng kwalipikado na Pilipino na bumoto by May 9, 2022 na nasa labas po ng Pilipinas ay mag-register for overseas voting. No? To give you an update in the next slide, we actually held our first RERB hearing on 20 July 2020, no? And we approved 683 applications for OV registration. Medyo marami-rami ang nagre-register sa Singapore kahit may restriction tayo, no, on movement, and yun nga, may pandemic, no. So to avail of the overseas voting registration, you should send an email to this email address, oav2020.sgp@gmail.com, to secure an appointment. Or kung nandiyan na po kayo sa embahada, pwede po kayong lumapit sa OV registration counter. Paalala lamang po, marami pa po ang nagtatanong about the voter's ID, no? Na-discontinue na po ito noong 2016. Kasi hindi na po natin kailangan ng voter's ID para bumoto. Ang kailangan natin actually ay yung Philippine Passport, no? To register, katulad kanina, state sa ating video, dadalhin lamang ang Philippine Passport. Pag seafarer ka, seaman's book. Pag dual citizen ka, itong mga dokumento. So just to give you some information on overseas voting in Singapore, alam nyo ba, noong 2016, 95% of the votes were actually cast by personal voting. And then 5% were cast by postal voting. Ang voter turnout rate, no, historically mataas talaga during the presidential elections. 44% noong 2016 and 33% noong 2019. Ang 2016 elections had the highest voter turnout since the start of the overseas voting exercise in Singapore, no, as mentioned in the next slide. The embassy expects OV registration to surge on the months leading to the 2022 elections. So ang deadline ay September 30, 2021. Wag na po tayo maghintay sa September 30. Kung pwede po, magpa-register na tayo. So we encourage all our kababayans to exercise the right to vote. So please register early. We will also flash the embassy information, although you can actually visit our website. Nandun din po ang aming mga contact details at ang aming Facebook account, no? So the embassy contact information, we have provided 3 duty phone hotlines, especially at this time, no? And with that, I am now opening the floor to the Q&A, Ms. Mindy. Thank you. Miss Minnie, hindi po, wala pong audio.
Ay, sorry po. Yes.
Sorry na pahaba po, ma'am.
Hindi, okay lang. Sabi ko nga, ang dami-dami. That was a lot of information to grasp, but very, very useful information para sa mga kababayan. Lalo na, it's about the passport, which is the one very important document that we really should take care and handle with care and with tender loving care. So as advised by Consular, please make copies of your passport just in case worst case scenario, nawawala siya. And make soft copies sa phone niyo. Yung phone, hindi kasi nawawala eh. Pero yung passport, baka mawawala. So please make sure na you have a copy of your passport, soft or hard copy, para lang in any worst case scenario, meron kayong backup. Yun lang po ang isang advice among all the many information that Consul Lala shared with us. So, may mga tanong-tanong po, usually about passport. May isang magandang tanong, what if, kasi earlier you suggested at least 1 year ahead, bago ang passport, mag-renew na. Eh kung, alam naman mga taga-Singapore, medyo may pag nasa Singapore, talagang on the dot sila. What if I want to renew it before 1 year, more than 1 year, pwede ba yun? Pwede
naman po. Actually, yung iba, gusto nga nila 2 years before, nagre-renew na po sila. So, pwede naman. Ang sinasabi lang natin, syempre, para ma-maximize mo lang din yung validity ng passport mo, so wait na lang na magamit mo siya after 9 years, tsaka ka magre-renew. Pero kung earlier, nyo gustong i-renew, choice nyo po yun.
Okay, so yun pala eh. So the earlier the better. Baka may other benefits pag may earlier pa. Additional pages, and then joke lang yun.
Mostly kasi Miss Minnie, dapat 2 years talaga ang validity ng passport bago po sila mag-renew ng work pass.
Okay. So yun po, pag masipag, punta na at mag-apply na. Tapos may tanong po dito, di ba indicated ang collection date ng passport pag nagre-renew? Is there like, parang hindi na lang mag-appointment ulit?
Kasi po before, walk-in po siya, no? Kaya nakalagay dyan estimated collection date. But starting June 2, ang ginawa natin, kaya po nakalagay estimated collection date kasi it could be earlier or it could be delayed, although very rare nga yung delayed. Kaya natin nire-require na kung pwede mag-set ng appointment, no? Kasi mino-monitor natin at nire-regulate natin yung number of clients na pumupunta sa embahada. Kasi kung napansin nyo, napakaliit po ng ating embahada at napakaliit po ng space. So, we request your patience as of now na talagang kailangan lahat ng mga serbisyo natin by appointment. But we are hoping na pag naayos na talaga ito, babalik tayo sa dati. Kaya sinabi natin, di ba, na in the interim lang ito lahat. May inconvenience tayong nararanasan, pero para naman to sa kabutihan po ng lahat. We have to make sure that our community ay safe sa COVID. So yun po, isa po yan sa mga measures taken by the embassy. And we request your understanding and cooperation as well.
Okay. So always think na COVID-19 situation, talaga ingat tayo, ha?
Opo.
Para may mga safe distancing din at yung mga ganun na issues. Okay, thank you po. Next question po. Pwede daw mag-walk-in para mag-sign ng SPA?
Katulad po ng na-mention ko kanina, lahat po ng services natin ay by appointment. So kung SPA po, kailangan nyo po mag-email sa notarials2020.sgp@gmail.com. Mabilis lang naman po, sumasagot po yung ating mga notarials team. And we request you pa nga, no? Unlike before na you can just bring the document to the embassy tapos you'll be surprised, kulang pala dahil you failed to read the requirements on our website. Ngayon, through the pre-screening, dahil sa online appointment, mas madali siya. So you are requested to send a copy para masabihan ka na ng processor, ito ang kulang. So dapat make sure, ha, before ka pumunta ng embassy, dala mo ito, kumpleto lahat ng requirements. So yun nga po, inuulit ko po, pasensya na, kailangan po talaga nating i-regulate po ang movement sa loob ng embahada. And we request also for your cooperation para po ito sa lahat.
Okay, thank you. So, all emails. So, immediate response naman ang natatanggap ng mga nagtatanong through email. Pwede ba naman tumawag?
Pwede naman po. We have hotlines. Kaya lang, Miss Minnie, ang ating telephone operator kasi ay iisa lamang, no? Kaya medyo overwhelming for our telephone operator. That's why we encourage our kababayans to use the email addresses. But 6 po ang email addresses ng Consular section. At lahat po yan, monitor ko every day, no? To make sure that my team is answering all these questions. So rest assured po, nasasagutin po talaga yan ng Consular section. Pero for passports po talaga, minsan aabutin ng half day bago kayo masagot kasi po yung encoder na gumagawa ng encoding ngayong araw na ito ay sasagot po yan ng emails pagdating ng gabi. So, kaya po medyo merong delay, pero we try to answer your emails within the day po.
Within 24 hours, ano? Para makapag-expect sila. At least next day may sagot na. So, not so bad. Okay, tapos po, ito, may isang tanong dito by Vien. Can that be produced here in Singapore instead of sending documents to Manila? Hindi ko lang sure kung anong documents.
Anong document po kaya?
Documents
Baka passport?
Or passport documents.
Passport po kasi sa Philippines talaga.
Sa Pilipinas talaga. Hindi po.
Yung production. I think even for Singapore, all their passports are produced here.
Okay. Tapos, may tanong, medyo on logistics, in a way. Pwede pa bang sabayin ang pag-renew ng passport at renewal ng contract? Same day kunin, bukod sa appointment. Pwede po ba yan? Tapos may isang tanong, paano po ba ang pag-release ng passport? Parang medyo technical, logistical question.
Ano kaya ang tanong niya about paano ang pag-release ng passport specifically? Okay, on the first question, pwede po bang pagsabayin ang renewal ng passport at renewal ng contract? Pwede naman po as long as you have secured an appointment in the consular section and the labor section. Ang kontrata po kay Labat, ha, hindi po sa consular section. So, mas okay nga yun kasi para isahan lang din ang pagpunta nyo sa embahada. Pero ang hindi ko maipapromise ay hindi nyo talaga makukuha ang passport nyo within the day. Kasi 6 weeks po talaga, no? So we can actually do that. Just send us an email and then we'll make arrangements.
Oh, okay. Okay, at least same one day I can shoot 2 birds ba with in one day, parang ganon.
Para yung kanina, yung like sa OV registration, Miss Mini na reminder ko na kung nandun na kayo sa embassy, lumapit na kayo sa OV registration counter para makapag-register na kayo. Para isahang lakad na rin sa embassy.
Ayun po. Sige, gawin niyo yung lahat yung pwede niyong gawin habang nasa at may isa pang tanong. Kanina si Vian yung nagtanong sa mga documents, tapos sasabihin ko lang names nila, si Leon na nagtanong doon sa SPA. Ayun, may si Kaula was asking yung pag-release ng passport.
Ano kaya in particular ang tinatanong ni Carla about the releasing, no, ng passports?
Baka,
Ang passport ay produced in the Philippines, no, and they are actually delivered by batch via diplomatic pouch, the Philippine Embassy in Singapore. And pagdating po niyan dito sa embassy, isosort na po namin yan at saka po namin i-upload sa website. So that's how we process the releasing of passports here. You can only get your new passport if dadalhin niyo po sa embassy. Siyempre yung lumang passport kasi ika-cancel po natin yung lumang passport.
okay. Okay. Thank you po. May konti pa mga tanong, so okay lang. Ito interesting po. And I've heard friends about this case. Paano po kung may kapangalan sila, pero yung kapangalan nila medyo may problema sa batas? Ano
yun,
po?
Miss Minnie, yung na-mention ko kanya, malamang magkakahit ka, no? Yung sa watchlist kanina, no? Although, ang embassy naman will be notified by the Office of Consular Affairs that this person, no, has a, there's a similar name na merong case or nasa watchlist. So this person will be requested by the embassy, and the passport officer will interview the person, tapos tatanungin bakit, and then once ma-clear yung pangalan, tsaka kami magre-report sa Manila. And then sasabihin ng Manila, okay, you provide us with these documents.
So yun, so may konting investigation process. Balik.
Opo.
Hindi
Pero
siya...
rare na rin actually talaga ngayon, no? Ang napapansin ko lang as nag-assume ng identity ng another person.
Okay. Saka in Singapore is quite strict, so siguro that helps. Ano po, ito, question ng usually mga foreign domestic workers natin where the passport is kept by the employer. Ano pong pwedeng gawin sa ganyan?
Okay, that's actually a contentious issue, no? If you will ask me as the head of the consular section, who has ownership of the passport? The Philippine passport remains at all times the property of the Philippine government. And the person holding the passport is the person is a mere possessor thereof, no? So dapat ang passport na ito ay hindi isusurrender sa ibang person or entity maliban sa passport holder at sa Philippine government. Although ang alam ko, I'm not sure, no, perhaps Labat can shed light on this, no. Some employers actually hold the passport, no. But if you will ask me, the passport is a primary identification document, so it should always be under the custody of the passport holder.
So far.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Although it's not my position to answer the question, but I interject. Under Singapore rules yata, bawal yon. The employer cannot hang on to the passport of the domestic worker. Bawal yon, according to the rules of the MOM. So you can always complain to the MOM.
Okay. Thank you po,
Sir.
Thank you for joining us. So narinig po ninyo yun. That was Rafi who asked about the...
And to add to that, Miss Minnie, yung sinabi ni Amba nga na dapat ireklamo yung employer, you can also inform us. Like for example, I noticed no, na yung iba, employer ang nakawala ng passport. So I will report it to Labat na Labat, let's include this employer in the blacklist of Polo. Para lang din, matuto. Kasi they're not supposed to hold these passports.
Tanong po, follow up, paano po kung yung employee ang gusto niya yung employer niya ang humawak para hindi mawala? Kasi baka natatakot siya na mawala yung passport niya. May ganun.
Parang rare yan. Na instance yun na gusto mismo employee ang ayaw humawak. Kung ayaw nyo hawakan yung passport nyo, ibigay nyo lang sa amin sa embassy, kami nang magtatago.
Sige, sasabihin ko. Okay. Thank you po. So we go to the next question. May tanong about voting naman. When can we get our voters ID?
Hindi nakikinig sa presentation. Ang sabi ko po, wala ng voters ID.
Pasensya na, Aldrin.
Wala na pong voters ID.
Ayun. Aldrin, kunin na. Yes, okay. And then, si Richie, with the current situation po natin ngayon, kailan po dapat mag-renew ng passport? O before 1 year, before expiry, ngayon po kaya? O, tanong. Kala ko 2 years.
I think 1 year is okay na. Okay na yung 1 year. Kasi previously, before naman the pandemic, we would encourage everybody to renew their passport 9 or 8 months before the expiration. So medyo may allowance na tayo na additional 3 months. So I think 1 year is okay.
1 year lang, okay na. Pero pwede rin ahead. Kanina, that was the question then. So, yes, at least 1 year para safe na makukuha ninyo yung bago, yung 6-month validity requirement. Next question po. Okay. May first timer po na maglalakad ng passport. Ano daw ang mga kailangan para makapag-renew ng passport po?
Katulad po kanina sa ating video, nakalagay doon, passport, yung inyong old passport, syempre, passport application form, and the confirmation slip of your appointment, and of course, the payment na 102 Singaporean dollars. So wag po kayong mag-alala, i-upload po namin yung video para po mas madali also for them to know kung ano yung mga requirements. Konti lang po ang requirements natin dito sa embassy kasi renewal lamang po ito.
May nabanggit ko si Charles here na may 7,000 bond.
Miss Minnie, that's a labor section matter.
Okay. Okay, sorry po, labor section 'yon. So next imbitahin natin si Labat.
Miss Minnie, sorry, just to add sa requirements, you do not need your employment contract for your passport renewal. Hindi po kailangan 'yon.
So kahit walang employment, di ba? So pwede mag-renew basically.
As long as you're a Filipino national, yes.
Okay. Okay, basta Filipino ka, and how do you prove that? Your passport. Yung passport ninyo, no need po ng contract or employment contract. Ayun po sabi ni Consular. Yes. May isa pong tanong dito, if mag-renounce po ba ng Philippine citizenship at magiging Singapore citizen na galing from Ronald, kailan po bang mag-renounce na rin po ba ng mga real estate properties niya sa Pilipinas?
That I cannot answer. I'm not too familiar with the rules on real estate in the Philippines. No, perhaps we can invite someone to shed light on that. No, but what I can just say is that once you renounce Philippine citizenship and you acquire Singaporean citizenship, you cannot be a dual citizen talaga. So, bago ka bumalik sa pagka-Pilipino mo, kailangan mong talikuran ang pagka-Singaporean mo.
Pero yung po mga properties, kunwari ako, bumili ako ng madaming lupa, tapos naging Singapore citizen, tapos yung mga bahay at lupa sa Pilipinas, akin pa rin po ba yun, di ba? Hindi naman mawawala yun. Tama po ba yun?
Minnie, if I may answer.
Yes, hi, go ahead, Consul Tony.
All right, okay.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so the Philippines allow, it depends on the property. Okay, so the Philippines allow foreign ownership of condominiums. Pero yung mga landed properties, I think foreigners, a very old law allows a foreigner to own, I think, one property.
One property, okay.
Yeah. So if a person is relinquishing Philippine citizenship, I suppose the wise thing for that person is to divest himself of or herself of the Philippine property. Kasi once na masilipan niya ng Philippine Land Authority, or someone may magsumbong sa court, someone could take the case to court and force that person to relinquish the property. So yun lang.
Yeah. Can I add to that? No.
Yes, hi Amba. Hi, please go ahead.
I don't think anymore. That may have been an old law, Tony, but now foreigners really cannot own landed property. So cannot own land. You can own all kinds of condos or office space, etc. as long as you do not own land. If you bawal yung land, it has to be Filipinos. Now, if you're a former Filipino, there are exceptions to the rules. I'm not very familiar with the details of it. I think it might behoove whoever is asking to check first kung what land he can retain, etc. Kasi may mga specific rules tayo eh. We have special laws that were passed to encourage former Filipinos to come back to the Philippines and own land, etc. But the details of that, I cannot, I don't have it off the top of my head. So he really has to consult some authorities on this.
Okay.
But in general, if you're a foreigner, you cannot own land in the Philippines. The only exception na is you are a former Filipino. Then there are some exceptions.
Okay. Thank you po sa sagot. Thank you. Oh, pwede, yung mga dating Filipino, pwede pa rin bumili ng mga ari-arian sa Pilipinas. Based on some restrictions siguro. So please check, si Ronald yun, di ba? Please check na lang sa mga regulations natin doon sa Pilipinas kung sino ang pwedeng bumili ng lupa-lupain. Kahit po sa Singapore, bawal ang foreigner mag-own ng land. But a foreigner can always own condos and apartments, but not landed property. Parang similar po yata for Philippines and Singapore. So yes. Okay. Last question, siguro mayroon pang hahabol. Ano na pong news sa pag-apply ng Philippine ID? Kung pwede na, ano po ba mga requirements? Kung may ID, Philippine ID.
National ID po ba?
National ID po siguro.
There were actually talks na last year sa pag-launch na national ID, but it stopped, no? Kasi siguro nga ngayon may sitwasyon tayo sa pandemic. So sa ngayon po wala pa po tayong national ID system. Wala pa pong nare-receive ang embassy na instructions from the home office.
Okay. Thank you po. So just stay cool. Wala pa pong mga requirements na kailangan. So let's just wait for more instructions. So I think any more last question, parang na clear naman lahat yung mga sinabi ni Consul Lala, is so detailed eh. So I guess if there are no more questions, we stop here, and I would like to say thank you so much, Consul Lala. I'd like to call on Christy just to say some words. Christy.
Thank you, Miss Minnie.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, good evening po, and thank you again for joining us for another meaningful night and a very informative night with Consul Lala Gandarosa. Maraming salamat, Consul Lala, for your Thursday night. And syempre, maraming salamat po, Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Joseph Yap, for the information that you shared us. And Consul Tony was also there. So maraming salamat po. And those who help us invite our friends and our members, thank you. Of course, nandyan yung Ateneo LSE, FLPH, CDE is there, UPAS, PAUS, Pinoy Grappers, and Netfil, BNG, and may nakalimutan ba ko? Pinoy Star, I saw you there, and A-Freight. Maraming salamat po for joining us and for sharing the invite sa mga friends ninyo at mga members ng group ninyo. So, pwede nyo pong panoorin ito ulit dun sa FB Live. So, you can continue sharing this with our kababayan, especially po yung mga merong bigger groups ng membership sa mga FB para mas marami pong makaalam, para kumonti rin yung trabaho natin kasi minsan dito po sila tumatawag. Pero okay naman po na tumawag sa amin, pero para po mas tama po yung maibibigay natin na information. So with that, maraming salamat po ulit. And we want to invite you for a special webinar session which will be on 28. Sa 28 po ito. Tuesday po siya. So this is a special one kasi there is an ongoing offer for treasury bonds in the Philippines, and the offer period is only up to August 7. So we will be happy to host our Treasurer of the Philippines, Ms. Rosalia V. De Leon. So, ayan po, Treasurer po ng Pilipinas, yung makakasama natin sa August 28 po yan. That's a Tuesday,
Right.
7 p.m. Marami po tayong pwedeng matutunan with this one. I saw some of their presentation in other countries. This is a very informative one as well, especially for investing in time of pandemic. So with that, maraming salamat again, and back to you, Minnie.
Yes, hi. Consul Lala, may isang habol na question. Pwede po ba? Consul Lala, isang question. Meron daw pong pasensya na, online service or electronic payment system ang ating embassy? Or
Ngayon po, cash payment pa po tayo, no? We're
last
actually
question lang.
we're actually exploring ways how to do an e-payment system. But yun nga, as I mentioned to you last night, Ms. Mimi, there are some requirements that we have to, and auditing and accounting regulations that we have to follow na nire-require ng Philippine government. So, of course, we continue to explore other ways, no, especially itong cashless payment kasi sa Singapore, cashless talaga halos lahat. And the ambassador is actually the one na ni-encourage kami na aralin namin kung ano yung mga pwede pang i-improve sa services ng embassy, particularly itong cashless payment. We'll let you know po pag meron ng changes, but rest assured na talagang ginagawan po namin ng paraan.
Thank you. I think that's the last question from Joyce. Maraming salamat. Pasensya na kung hindi ko napansin kanina. But yes, wala pa pong cashless payments, but I think it's in work in progress. So that sounds good, and we're optimistic. Kakayanin ni Amba ang embassy. So yun po, sa lahat po nandito, meron pong talk on treasury bonds sa Tuesday, July 28, 7 p.m. Dito po, mag-register din ulit kayo. Bayanihan Society will be hosting it, and we will have Consul Tony, siya magiging moderator. So please don't miss that unique and rare opportunity to invest in the Philippines kasi gagawin yung pera sa improvement ng ating Pilipinas. So please do not forget, Tuesday, July 28, 7 p.m. And that's it. Thank you so much, friends. Until next week. Then thank you so much. Good night. Take care. And keep safe, distance, wear your mask always. Yun lang po. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Pamba. Thank you, Consulala.